What's good out there, Liquid Trucking, and welcome into the Liquid Trucking Podcast. I am your host, Marcus, fresh off of a 3-day weekend and really feeling the energy today. So if I get a little bit hype, I apologize, but I had a good weekend, got to run back home to my hometown, go to a rodeo, hit the lake for a couple of days, play some golf. I mean, it was amazing. So I'm charged up and ready to go for our next Liquid Trucking Podcast episode. And this one is a really cool idea that came to us from Jason when we were in meetings together. And I'll explain it in a second here, but I'm really excited about it for multiple reasons, and we'll get into that here in a few moments. First, before we do that, I want to send you a quick reminder to mark your calendars for September 21st, 2024, from 2 to 6 p.m. It is the second annual Liquid Trucking Employee Jamboree, and we've got live music with Lucas Minor. I'm going to read you here the flyer that I was sent. It says, "We are thrilled to announce that after the success of last year's event, the second annual Liquid Trucking Employee Jamboree is happening. More details about the party and the sign-up sheet will be released soon. So keep an eye out for details in a future message. We can't wait to celebrate with all of you." This is so cool. I heard stories, almost like tall tales, legends about the employee jamboree last year. All the great food. I believe Matt Cleach and Polar Bear, all the great camaraderie, all the employees and their families hanging out, having a great time. And it sounds like this year, Liquid's pulling out all the stops and making it even better. So make sure to mark your calendars. Again, 9/21/24, September 21st this year from 2 to 6 p.m. It's the second annual Liquid Employee Jamboree with live music from Lucas Minor. It's going to be great, man. It's going to be so much fun. I wish I could get there. Maybe I will. Who knows? Maybe I'll fly out. I haven't decided yet, and it's not really my decision to make. But if we can make it happen, we'll make it happen. One thing I can guarantee is that all of you are going to have a phenomenal time. So make sure to mark your calendars for September 21st this year, 2 to 6 p.m. Okay, on to the content of our episode here. As I said, Jason brought this idea up. He's looking around and he's like, we have a ton of former drivers working in the office. It's something that's happened here at Liquid. We've had people come off the road and pick up office jobs. We've had people get a lot of experience from other companies and then come work in the office. And why not highlight that a little bit? One thing that I notice in doing this job, and again, I've said this before, this isn't the only podcast that I do for a trucking fleet, but I see sometimes in other trucking companies that there is a bit of a disconnect sometimes between the drivers and the office. And that might be dispatch, it might be driver managers, it might be load planners. But the point here is that a lot of times the people that are working in the office don't have a good frame of reference for what is actually going on out there on the road. Now, of course, you can gain all this experience by just listening to drivers and constantly experiencing through them the things that they go through. But I do think that there's a very important, maybe missed factor there, which is, hey, until you've actually experienced it, until you're in the weeds, you'll never truly know what it is that we go through out here as drivers. I say we. I'm totally not a driver. They. And I think that type of experience really can only be gained there. I had one of my best friends has worked in preventative maintenance for basically his entire professional career. And he always told me, because he was big on, they would have to do pipe fittings and they would have to come into these large factories or large mills and they would have to basically tear something down and rebuild it so that it worked. And he would get plans from the engineer who'd never actually been on site. The engineer was handed blueprints. The engineer drew up the plans and handed them to my friend and said, "Here, go build this." And my friend would look at the blueprints and say, "This isn't going to work." He hasn't seen it with his own eyes. He doesn't know that this pipe can't turn at a 90-degree angle here because there's a wall or something. And basically, it's the same thing. That engineer has great experience, lots of education, very smart person. but he hasn't been standing where my preventative maintenance buddy that's going to be tasked with building these things or making these adjustments is standing. And I think that's why Liquid has such a great camaraderie between their employees in the office and the drivers. I never hear cross stuff about the employees in the office from the drivers. They love you guys. They really do. And for good reason. You're really good at your jobs, just like they are. So this week's episode is going to focus on former drivers in the office. And there's actually more of them than you would think. I've got 2 interviews set up today. We're going to be talking to Beau, Hanke, Cole Brown, and Chris Baltushis first. And then after that, my second interview, we're going to be hearing from Mike Wilson, Chris Willenborg, and Brian Cahoe. So I've got 6 former drivers in the office, and they're all going to talk to us today, share some of their experience, and talk about how their experience out on the road helps them understand and work as well with the Liquid drivers as they do. Very excited about it. Glad to have Chris Baltushis from the Barto terminal checking in. It's always fun when we get on the phone with Cole and Beau. And Mike and Chris and Brian, I think, going to be making their first podcast appearance. So very exciting episode. Lots of good information coming up around the corner. Get ready, because I'm about to fire off these interviews, and they're a lot of fun. I will tell you that right now. We shared some laughs. We got a lot of good questions answered. So get ready for our episode about former drivers in the office right now.
Welcome to the gold standard of podcasts for the gold standard of drivers. This is the Liquid Trucking Podcast with your host, Marcus Bridges.
Next up here on the Liquid Trucking Podcast, I've got 3 gentlemen that are former drivers working in the office joining me. Checking in from Barto for one more appearance here on the podcast is Barto Terminal Manager Chris Baltushis. Chris, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you bet. Glad to be here.
Always love it when you stop by. And 2 of my all-stars, guys that you hear on this podcast all the time. I've got driver training and development leader Cole Brown on the phone. Cole, thanks for being here.
How we doing?
Always good, man. Always good when it's a day for the Liquid Trucking Podcast. You guys make it too easy on me. And we've also got driver training and development leader Beau Hanke on the line, sitting right next to Cole. How's it going, Beau?
Good. How are you doing?
Oh, man. Living the dream, saving lives.
Hasn't been that long, man. I feel like I just talked to you.
Yeah, I know. And I'm going to wear out my welcome real quick if I keep going back to the well on you guys. So I'm going to try to give you a break after this one, okay?
Well deep, my friend. Well deep.
So, Chris, I'm going to start with you because you've been on the podcast a few times before, but I don't think we've ever talked in depth at all about your driving experience. Talk to me about how long you drove truck for.
No, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years. I drove off and on for companies before I came to work for Barto 24 years ago. So, I did some reefer work and drive-in work and some gut work in tankers, but for Barto, I guess I drove for probably the first good 7 years of being here. I delivered a lot of the very first loads into these ethanol plants that I just got built, so I was the guy that was hooking up the hoses to the tanks that leaked everywhere and then trying to figure out how to help them fix their tanks so that we could safely offload.
Okay. A little bit of a guinea pig then,
yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. My initial training, and I probably shouldn't say this out loud, but my initial training was 4 of us in a semi-truck at Dakota City Tyson over here, and we all suited up together, and we all unloaded together, so we knew what we were doing.
Well, I don't see why you can't say that. I mean, look, it's far enough in the past, and you guys obviously did a good job of figuring out what you needed to be doing, so that's always good. That's all good things in my eyes, but then again, my opinion and 50 cents won't buy you a cup of coffee. Don't forget that.
Yeah, but yeah, that's how we learned how to unplug chemical back then. Is just we all got in the truck, went over there together, all figured it out at the same time, and then we all went our separate ways.
Now, was that trial and error something that you enjoyed, or are you one of those guys who would rather have it figured out long before and not have to do the trial and error bit?
No, I didn't mind the trial and error. Like I said, with going to these ethanol plants when they were brand new, that's all it was trial and error. You didn't know where the tank was. You didn't know where the valves were. You didn't know if some guy had a long night in a bar and come in and forgot to put bolts in the pipe overhead. You had no idea till you got there and hooked it up. So, it was all pretty much trial and error everywhere you went.
And it sounds like that may have happened. Maybe there was a couple rough nights at the bar, and you just figured that stuff out when you got there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I know how it goes, man.
Contractors, man, it happens.
Yep, absolutely. Contractors, man, they work a rough job. I know it. I have multiple friends that are contractors in one way or the other, and while they're some of the nicest and hardest working guys I know, they can also party harder than just about anybody I know. So I totally understand that. Cole, let's turn to you. I know that you and Beau spent some time out pounding the pavement together out for Liquid Trucking, and you kind of both got into the office at the same time. But let's talk about your experience. How long were you out there driving for before you transitioned to the office, Cole?
For the company, for Liquid Trucking, I was on and off in the driver's seat from 2018 until about 2022. So 4 years on and off. I had started regionally, did that for a couple of years with Liquid Trucking, and then actually left the company for about 3 months. Just wanted to be home nightly kind of deal. I had some stuff going on at home. Company I went to ended up being terrible. Lied about the loads, lied about the pay, lied about the equipment. I was ready to really just come back to Liquid Trucking and go back regional when they reached out and said, hey, we got a local training position open. So came back and trained here as a driver trainer for about a year. Went up into dispatch for a year. Wasn't a fan of the whole dispatch side of things, so I got back in the truck again for another probably 6 months or so before I came back into the office in October of last year, 2023.
Okay. So it sounds like you're kind of a dip your toe in the water before you jump in the pool guy.
Yeah. So I've seen about every department here now. So.
Well, that's great. I mean, it adds to the experience, and it's all part of the entire job. Like, you got to know all these things to do the job that you do at this point in time. And Beau, same for you. How long were you out driving? I know that you've had experience. We've talked about your experience up in the Alaskan tundra and things like that on this podcast before, but collectively, how long were you driving before you got to where you are now?
Oh, man, I want to say 3 or 4 years. Liquid Trucking was actually mixed into my experience as well. I left about 8 months after I started here. So I worked for all three companies, OFC, Schmidt, and Barto.
Mm-hmm.
I actually worked for 3 years, running chemical. Then I came down here, and I was local for not real long, and then I went back regional. So I kind of dipped all over the place. But yeah, some flatbed, reefer, I've piggybacked. I've pretty much done it all for the most part.
And, well, I feel like since we've got you both here on the line, we can do a retroactive employee review. Chris, how was Beau as a driver?
You don't want me to answer that.
I love it. Well, it's funny because I think about all the other podcasts I do for other trucking fleets, and it's known on this podcast that I do a couple others. If there's a gripe from drivers, and I mentioned this off the top of the episode here, if there's a gripe from drivers, it's been pretty consistent from my other fleets that I feel like my dispatcher just doesn't understand what I'm going through. Or I feel like my driver manager just doesn't quite get it. Chris, I'll start with you. With all the experience, all the trial and error and everything, how has knowing what you know from holding the wheel and being out on the road for as long as you have helped you kind of bridge that gap between the drivers that you have now and helped you understand what they're actually going through?
Well, with, knowing every single trailer in the Barto fleet from, the size to how it works, that really helps because I can answer any of the drivers' questions, issues that they've had where they unload. I've been through probably 95% of their issues, so they can call me and I can walk them through just about anything. Even when they have, like dome issues, I've had guys call me where they can't get their dome seal right, and I've, given them a couple of quick tips and tricks, and they've seemed to unload the trailer and get it back here to where we can, repair what's needed on it. Just from my experience of doing this stuff and being with this company for as many years as I have been, there's not much I haven't seen. As far as the drivers and their dispatchers not, understanding them, the biggest thing is communication. If these drivers aren't telling you what they need, or what they're seeing out there, then the dispatch manager, dispatcher, load planner, whoever doesn't know, the issues that drivers have. Some of these guys clam up, it's just the way it is. You almost got to, dip them in salt water so you can open them back up again. But, communication is the biggest thing. And it goes both ways. us in the office, we have to be able to keep that communication line open with the drivers, and they need to feel that, we are there for them no matter what, that we can answer the questions. We can help them get home when needed. We can do all the things that's needed to be done to keep these guys moving and keep them happy. At the end of the day, we want them home safe and sound, and we also want them generating a decent enough paycheck where they don't go anywhere. And you've also got to make the company money to where, we can keep our jobs as well.
Absolutely. And do you find that just kind of relaying that experience to the drivers when they do have issues helps them go the opposite direction of clamming up, and almost like you did dip them in salt water? Does that work that way? Like, let's say you're having an issue or the driver's having an issue and they don't know that you've had as much experience on the road. When you tell them that, do they relax a little bit and kind of open up to you?
Oh, yeah, they do. They do. And then they just feel free to call you, 300 times a day with, 350 other questions, which is fine. It doesn't bother me a bit, or they'll call the office here and talk to Corey and Angie. If they can't answer it, they just stick them right through to me, and I get them, figured out and going again.
Absolutely. And that's all part of that communication piece that you were talking about and how important it is. You're okay with the 300 calls a day as long as it's in the vein of communication and making sure that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Just don't call you 300 times a day to talk about the football score. You don't have that kind of time, I'm sure.
No. I mean, I'll talk about it, but then we're going to go right back to figuring out what's wrong with your truck or trailer.
For sure. Cole and Beau, since you guys are sitting there right next to each other, I just kind of field this question to both of you. How has your experience been in letting the drivers know, hey, we've got a lot of experience, we've seen a lot of the things? Has that loosened up the drivers for you guys when you're training them? Because that is a very kind of intimately involved scenario there. The training at Liquid is I won't call it grueling. I haven't been through it, but I understand that it's a pretty serious training process, and not everybody makes it through. Do the drivers kind of breathe a breath of fresh air when they hear all the experience that you guys have had actually out on the road?
Well, Chris hasn't been through it either, so.
Yeah, I used to train guys long before you guys got here.
I do think Chris said it best when he said, you get a different level of respect from the drivers when they find out you've been in the truck, whether it's with the company or not. But to me and Beau's defense, when we get a new class in and they hear that, A, we've been drivers before, B, is with this company, you can almost see the relief, just the weight lift off their shoulders with the amount of respect you give from them. They want to sit there and listen to you. You don't want to go show up in a new company, sit through 2 days in the classroom with a guy that doesn't know anything about trucking or has no experience doing what you're here to do. Yeah, the experience that we have in the truck, I feel like, is 85% of our jobs. It makes us immaculately better at what we do.
It's fairly exciting to actually tell people that when they get to orientation. You get to say, hey, we've got guys that came from a truck. They work in the office now, and like Cole said, the relief off their shoulders, and they don't get that in a lot of places. The dispatcher's never even seen a truck before in most of these companies, so it's a big deal.
Absolutely. Well, they say respect is earned, not given. And I feel like when you're setting up to train a bunch of guys, that there's that instant earned respect when they know that you've seen all of this. You've seen it, and not just on a safety video, you've seen it firsthand. And it doesn't surprise me that you guys see that on their faces when you get a new class in, like, thank God we're not dealing with a bonehead. This guy actually has his ducks in a row. Do you ever, Beau, capitalize on some of your stories from up in Alaska that you've told on the podcast here before, and maybe gain a little bit of an extra shred of respect from the drivers?
Yeah, I definitely plug it every once in a while, for sure.
Yeah, because it's got to be like being an old high school quarterback with a state championship under his belt. Like, I'm not going to talk about it all the time, but you'll know.
Yeah, right.
But this guy with a Maestro truck, he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, plug it when you can. But no, I think just how fast I talk and about what I talk about, they, sitting in that classroom's tough. I will say that. You don't learn that in the classroom. You learn it out in the field. And Cole and I both, got to train in the truck as well. And I feel like that's where you learn most of your stuff. I mean, we beat them down with policies and how this needs to be done, or what we could do to you here, or, safety bonuses and all that stuff. So, they're very overwhelmed by the time they hit a truck. So, like I said, most of that stuff's done in a truck, and that's when these guys really come out of their shell.
Sure. Well, and that in and of itself right there is a good example. Is that you understand, even though you're beating them in the face with all of these policies and safety protocol and everything, that the majority of their education is going to happen once they actually sit down in the seat. And that probably, I would think, just from my standpoint, that would relax me as a student too, is that my trainer knows that. He understands this process. He doesn't only understand the job, but there is almost like an aging process that happens in the training process. And until you get that 2 weeks under your belt, who knows what's going to happen, but at least I've got this guy that can answer my questions.
Yeah.
Do you guys feel like you've ever had somebody that is very well experienced out there, when you are training them, kind of look down their nose at you because maybe they have more experience than you do and they don't think that they need this type of training?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with that when it happens? Because I imagine that's an attitude adjustment that has to happen pretty quick.
A lot, most of the time that attitude we get is from guys that have come from owning their own trucks, so the owner operators. They walk in and think they know everything there is to know, whether they've been pulling tanking as an owner operator or not. They come in here wanting to run the show, and you basically got to lay it out for them. Hey, man, you're working for a company now. You work for us. This is how we do things, and we've been out there and we've done it. So, you're not running on your own schedule anymore, kind of thing. I don't know. I feel like that goes a long way with them, kind of making them realize that they work for somebody else now. They can't run on their own schedule. They can't, unload a trailer how they know how to unload a trailer. We got to teach them the ways we do things.
Absolutely. But then that also comes along with all the good news. You don't have to pay for your own repairs anymore. You don't have to pay for your own insurance. Right. You don't have to pay for your own fuel. It's a give and take there for sure, but I'm sure there's adjustment.
Either. Yeah.
Now,
absolutely.
Chris, after listening to Beau and Cole talk a little bit here, what's going through your head as far as just the respect earned that you get from your drivers? I know it's a little bit smaller operation, but because it's a little bit of a smaller operation over there, absolutely every aspect of it. I assume that just gives instant respect from drivers that are in training out there at Barto, or new drivers, when you just solve their problems immediately. I mean, it's got to be great. Like, I don't have a boss that can solve my problems immediately. I ask him all the time. Basically just comes up with more problems for me to solve on my own.
Well, if you're one of my shop guys or wash bay guys, I make sure I create more problems for them to solve on their own. But, I do that because they got to grow up sometime. But, as far as the drivers go, in my experience, I mean, yeah, I don't demand or command respect from anybody. Respect is earned, and I think that they realize, after sitting down and visiting with me, that they know that I've been through this. I mean, I've driven them, I've flipped them, I've worked on them, I've washed them out. There's not much I haven't done with this equipment up here. So they understand that I know every aspect, or more than most, when it comes to this kind of stuff. And I think that, like you say, after they talk to me a couple times and they ask me some questions and they get stuff figured out and they learn something, that the respect is then given. But, it's earned, and I think that I've done a pretty good job overall after, all these years. And I hope I'm still doing a good job, and these guys can continue to respect me and continue to rely on my knowledge, as I sit here at my desk and try to find more work for them to do. So
absolutely.
I hope that it stays there.
Well, I think it has. I mean, listen, I don't think they'd be telling me to get in touch with you for a podcast episode if it wasn't. But again, I don't know that I'm a real good barometer to measure those things by. So keep that in mind too. But what's...
Yeah, we're going to get to his review here in a minute.
Okay.
Hey, go for it. I look forward to those.
So, Chris, what's one piece of advice that you would give a driver that might be thinking about right now, maybe transitioning to the office if there was ever the opportunity? Is there anything that you learned over the transition that you would kind of say, hey, I think you should know this going in?
I would say find somebody with a nice leather couch that charges, the bare minimum per hour, and have a long conversation about it. No, but seriously, it's tough. You take a guy off the road and you stick him in the office after about 3 to 6 months, and I bet the two guys on the other end can, agree with me. After about, I'd say 6 months, that itch is there. I haven't really been in a truck in I don't know how many years, and there are days I just love to throw the phone out the window, go climb on a truck, and go down the road.
Yeah.
It's still there. As far as being in the office goes, you got to have the right personality. You can't just throw anybody in the office and deal with truck drivers. Truck drivers do not generally do well with other truck drivers. They live a secluded life. They're in the truck. That's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
They have the windshield, the passenger seat to talk to. So when you stick them in the office, you just got to find the right guy, and if that individual feels that they can handle it, then, you give them a shot. But it's not for everybody. It's really not. I don't know what other advice to give anybody, but if it's something they want to try, hey, go for it. If it doesn't work out, you tried it. That seat is always going to be there. You can get right back behind the wheel and go down the road again.
Absolutely. Now, I'll ask you a little bit tougher question here. If there was a seat open right now, would you take it, or are you keeping the job that you've got because maybe some people would be very upset with you if you jumped back into the seat of a truck?
Well, the problem is I have way too many irons in the fire to get up out of this chair and go down the road anymore.
Gotcha.
If I didn't have all the hats to wear, yeah, I'd do it. I don't know if I'd do it, week in, week out, but I sure wouldn't mind getting back in and going on the road a few times a week,
Yeah, well, there's a bunch of freedom in it. I mean, it's one thing that drivers tell me all the time when I say, what do you like about your job? The freedom. I'm out here. I'm rolling down the road. Yeah, I've got a job to do. Yeah, I have a lot to pay attention to, but there's nothing like being on the open road. I mean, I just did a 7-hour one-way road trip over the weekend, and while I really wanted to get there and then I really wanted to get back, I do enjoy that time, man, just hanging out, listening to a podcast, listening to music, and having the wind blow through my beard a little bit. Cole and Beau, how about from you? Some advice from either one of you guys from a driver considering making the transition to the office?
It's different. It's the other side, man. It's the dark side. You get to stuff that you never even thought of while you were a driver. Like, yeah, I just drive this truck around and deliver to places, and then I get to go home. It's not that. It's, everything that happened while you were at the customer or after the customer, before the customer. It's everything that, as a driver, you never even imagined. And, you're, unfortunately, some of the things that you did, you might have to reprimand somebody for, and that's tough. That's really tough.
My advice
is, if you're a guy that likes the freedom, you like to wake up, hit the road, and not have to talk to anybody if you absolutely have to, stay in the truck. Because, the office life, you got a team of people you're working with every single day. You have people to report to. You have people that are reporting to you. And if you're not somebody that can handle a group of people on a daily basis, stay in the truck.
Yeah, and you missed one from your list there. You got a podcast host that bugs you from out of nowhere every now and then and just demands 20 minutes of your time. So don't forget that one. But so how about going the other way? What if there was an office staff member that's considering jumping maybe back in the truck, or maybe jumping in the truck for the first time? Any advice for those types out there?
That's tough.
Yeah, that's really tough. I mean, like Chris said,
that's a question for Dear Abby.
if you ever drove a truck, you think about it. I don't know. It's that's a tough one.
If it were 5 years ago, I would say do it, because I really enjoyed my time in the truck. Still think about it at times, about how much I did like it. But, from just a 5-year period, every once in a while I get to go out and I recover a truck. And I just drove one back from North Carolina a few weeks ago. Getting back out there and just seeing how much more traffic there is now compared to even 5 years ago, and how people act and drive around trucks, I don't think I could ever do it. I don't think I could get back in the seat and get back out on the road just because of that. So if somebody was asking me now that wanted to get into trucking, I would probably say don't get in a truck. If you want to get into the trucking business, maybe look at an office job or something like that. But I don't know. Me personally, being in the truck anymore, I couldn't do it.
Beau?
I had a lot of fun, man. I had a whole lot of fun. I loved being in the truck. I used to listen to nothing going down the road. Absolute silence all day.
You animal. Good Lord. How did you, I mean, Chris has mentioned a leather couch and Dear Abby on this podcast. I think that would put me in an institution.
I solved the world's problems at least 1,000 times. So So,
Yeah.
forgot it when I got home. Forgot how to do it when I got home, and then rethought about it the next week when I went out. So
Sure.
I had a lot of fun. I'm the opposite probably. Like, if you're a younger guy and you really want to get out there and experience life, trucking was a great opportunity to see the world and kind of the different people and cultures around. So I don't think any truck driver that you ask would say that there wasn't, like, what's your favorite truck stop or what's your favorite place to eat, or, and it's generally not in their town. It's somewhere else.
Yep. Awesome. Well, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough. I think that your experience is so valuable in the company that you work for, and you can see it come through the new drivers. You can see all the drivers that have been there for 20 plus years. The company has a lot of respect among the staff, and I think that it's for good reason. You guys know the job, and you don't just know your job. You know a lot of the aspects of everyone else's jobs too, and that's a very special employee that you want to keep your hands on for sure. So before I let you go, I want to give you guys an opportunity to say any last words or leave us with any final thoughts. Chris, we'll go out there to Barto and start with you, man. Anything to say to any of the drivers or staff that might be listening?
Man, I got nothing. I really don't. I mean, we work with a great bunch of people. They all do a really good job, and all I can do is just say, hey, thank you, and let's hit her hard again tomorrow.
There you go. And that's not nothing, Chris. You did good there. I like it. That went from nothing to something real quick. Beau, Cole, any final thoughts before we let you go?
Yeah, for me, it's Cole. To the guys that are out there living their life on the road, props to you guys. Constantly do a great job. Because like I just got done saying, for the last couple trips I took in a truck, I don't know if I could go back out there. So you guys that put up with everything on the road like you do every single day, every weekend that you stay out, you're tougher than I am clearly right now. So keep after it. You're doing a great job.
Beau?
I talk about probably the same thing every time I'm on here, but yeah, just more to what Cole said. Just you're appreciated 100%. Even though we get caught up in here, our problems are multiplied by 179. So
Good point.
So it is a little tougher for us to bear down on just one of you. So remember, we are doing stuff. We don't just get to watch TV in here and sit around and crack jokes. We get the serious stuff too, the accidents and things like that. So keep up the good work is what I'll say.
I'm actually the only one that's paid to be here and crack jokes. And I got to tell you guys, it's a good life. I wouldn't give it up. I could not see myself jumping in to a truck this day and age or any day and age. I don't have the gumption, but you guys all do. And you also have the gumption to transition to the office and have it be smooth and really effective and helps the company out a ton. So can't thank you enough for your time. Chris Baltushis, Cole Brown, and Beau Hanke. You guys have a fantastic day, and I will get you back on here soon, but I'm going to give you all a break, okay? Don't worry about hearing from me for the next few weeks.
All right. Right on. Thanks, Marcus.
Thanks, Marcus. See ya.
All right, we're going to move it right along here on the Liquid Trucking Podcast with 3 more office staff members that used to be truck drivers themselves. I'm loving this episode so far, and I want to welcome these guys in. First off, we've got Safety and Fleet Coordinator Mike Wilson on the line. Mike, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for asking. Thank you.
Of course. After that, I've got Chris Willenborg. He is a load planner for Liquid Trucking. Chris, thanks for being here.
Yep. Thank you.
And finally, we've got Brian Cahoe. He's a dispatcher on the line. All 3 of you guys making your first appearances here. Brian, thank you so much for the time today, sir.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Brian, I am going to start with you here. Let's talk a little bit of background. I want to learn about your guys' careers in trucking before you got to where you're at now, and kind of the journey from the truck to the office. But Brian, for you, how long were you driving for?
Well, with Liquid, I've only driven for about 6 months, but then before that, I worked for Casey's General Stores and drove for almost 20 years with them.
Oh, wow. So a lot of experience there. Now, with the General Store, were you driving reefer? Were you dry van? What were you tugging over there?
Fuel tanker.
Oh,
so it's all fuel, gas and diesel. Yep.
Okay, so you had a lot of experience on the tanking side long before you ever got to Liquid.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Chris, how about for you, man? How long was the driving career before you joined up on the load planning side?
7 years with Liquid Trucking.
7 years all with Liquid Trucking. That's cool. I love that.
Sure.
So any experience with any other companies before you got to Liquid?
No, sir. Started here when I was 23, so
Okay.
first truck job.
Very cool. Starting your
He
career
was
with
a pretty
Liquid.
boy then.
Well, that brings us to you, Mike. Tell me about your driving career before you jumped into the office.
My driving career started with Schmidt Transportation. I started working for Roger part-time in July of 1993, and we were a 7-truck operation. Then after being with Raj for about 3 years, got hired on working for the city and kind of left the trucks for about 7 years, came back to work for Schmidt Transportation. This time Roger asked me to be a driver or trainer for him. That time I didn't have my CDL. Went out, got my license, and started working with late Jim Cronin, who was a trainer at the time back in 2001. So I had about 7 years working as far as driver trainer, and I was asked to come into the office and help Dave Blotzer, who was doing all the paperwork and all the admin stuff with the new hires. And the requirements for the FMCSA were just getting bigger and bigger. And Dave just needed some more hands so we separated it up between administrative and an operation, and that was part of the safety department.
Okay. Now, Mike, I'll go ahead and just continue with you here. Was it a hard transition coming off the road and getting into that paperwork and all the things that go on in the office? Or was it something that came pretty easy to you, something that you enjoyed?
It was something I enjoy. It was actually being talked about 4 years before we actually made the move. So, at that time, I kind of call it as more work with less people. Now it seems like there's less work and more people.
Okay, I get you. Now, how about you, Brian? Same question. Was it a tough transition for you moving from the truck to the office?
It was. There was a challenge before I came here to Liquid as far as just learning, the office side of it. I had no experience, with that, and also learning how to manage other drivers and also co-drivers I shared trucks with. I was now going to begin to supervise them. So it was definitely a challenge to learn all that. But, with time, you just try to treat each other fair and be fair to the drivers, and a little bit easier than at that point.
Sure. I imagine so. How about for you, Chris? Same question. Tough transition or something that came pretty easy to you?
It came pretty easy to me. I had the fortune of knowing most of our fleet when I moved into our office, so I already knew all the drivers. I knew the job, so I just had to learn the computer and office side of things.
Sure. Now, as a load planner, do you find that your experience in the truck really helps out the drivers that you're dealing with now because you've kind of been in the weeds, you've seen it, you've experienced it firsthand? Does that help out with the job you're doing now?
It does. Allows me, because I have more experience with it, I can kind of judge how long it's going to take what the drivers are going to have to do to load or unload. And I know a lot of our customers, so that kind of helps me be able to plan better based on how long they're going to be somewhere.
Absolutely. Mike, I'll throw this question to you first. A lot of the drivers that I talk to, and this is independent of Liquid Trucking, okay, because this isn't the only podcast that I do, and I've talked to a lot of drivers that would tell me, I just wish that the office staff all had to go out and be on the road for a couple weeks or a month so they could understand what we're dealing with out here. Do you find that the drivers there at Liquid kind of have a bit more respect for those of you that have spent some time behind the wheel?
The ones that know that we were, yeah. And then with me, I'd still put on, about anywhere from 15 to 30,000 miles a year running around out there. I still do loads every now and then, so I kind of have multiple offices there.
Sure. Now, how about for you, Brian? Do you find that the drivers give you a little bit of a break since you've got so much experience, especially with tanking?
Yeah, and I think they they lean to me a little bit for help when they have questions as far as troubleshooting, issues that go out on the road as far as even the tank side, but then just logbook issues, parking, opinions on where to stop, hours of service. They ask a little bit more if they know.
Right. They know that you've been out there in the weeds. I totally get that. And it seems like such a great resource to have so many of you guys in the office that have experience out there on the road. There's just a wealth of information and knowledge that you guys have. Sometimes it seems like it's just making sure that the right question is asked. There's going to be an answer somewhere within the Liquid office. You just got to find the right person, ask the right question.
Yep.
So,
and we definitely all lean on each other as well, with questions here in the office.
Yeah, that was actually kind of in the vein of where I was going to go with the next question here. Is I just got off the phone with Beau, Hanke, Cole Brown, and Chris Baltushis, who all have quite a bit of driving experience under their belts as well. And having Beau and Cole in the kind of driver training realm, I feel like it really helps these drivers get their feet wet earlier than what they might, because they're talking to two people that have been through it and have seen it from the windshield of a Liquid truck. When you guys are working with the drivers, is that something that you try to get out to them right away? Mike, you actually mentioned it when I asked you the question a minute ago. You said the drivers that know give you a little bit of a higher degree of respect there. Is it something, Mike, that you're constantly trying to tell drivers, or do you just let them find out as they find out?
I just let them find out as they find out. And I mean, since I kind of got removed on the driver training program, I just let that program and that department go through their motions. If they want to mention that I'm a part of it, great. If not, there's plenty of other job tasks and everything to keep all the spokes going around when the wheel of this business, because we have multiple businesses, and just keeping everything straight, whether it's OSC, Schmidt, Barto, Omaha Tank Wash. There's just lots going on within our company in general.
Absolutely. Now, Chris, is it something that you like to offer up as a load planner? I'm wondering if it's a little bit different because of your position where you're at. Is it something that you like to tell drivers right off the bat, like, hey, I've sat where you've sat, I kind of understand the ropes out here?
The few that I talk to, I do. In my position here, I don't talk to a lot of the guys when they come on board anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They usually just meet their dispatcher and go straight into it with them.
So when it's appropriate, you'll let them know?
A lot of the drivers, yes.
Gotcha. And how about for you, Brian? Is it something you like to make known, or something that you kind of hold close to the vest?
Yeah, once I introduce myself to the driver and meet them, we go over kind of the day-to-day of how dispatch communicates with the drivers and back and forth. And so, yeah, I tell them just to kind of give them a heads up that please call me. I can, a lot of times I can help you with the troubleshooting side of things. And, before we always have to call safety, but also safety is a good resource, as far as Cole and Beau with knowing the tank. So, yeah, I always let them know that, yeah, I've got driving experience and stuff out on the road.
Sure. And definitely important, I think, for a dispatcher with the relationship that you've got to build with your drivers. Probably a good thing to let them know right off the bat, just so you can start that relationship out on the best foot possible.
Right.
Gotcha. So I'll stay here with you, Brian, and Mike and Chris. I'll field this question to you as well, so you can kind of be thinking about it while Brian's talking. And Brian, sorry to put you on the spot with it, but one interesting thing that came out of the last conversation I had with Chris and Beau and Cole was I asked what one piece of advice would be to a driver that is maybe thinking about making the same transition and coming off the road and heading into the office for a new side of their career. Is there anything that you would tell them, Brian, if you had a driver that was considering the move?
It's just definitely a big responsibility. You're responsible for, 20 to 30 other drivers or more at times. You keeping track of everything. It's definitely a high stress and a fast paced environment. So, it'd definitely be something to think about when you make that transition.
And would you make the decision again, same way that you made it before?
Yeah. Here in the last year, I even got rid of my CDL. I didn't update it because I was focused on just staying in the office. I didn't want to have to think about, every time the job gets stressful, I wanted to go back to driving. I wanted to focus on this side of my career now. Definitely at some point, guys get burned out on the road. It's not easy. It wears on your family. And, if guys think that's a good fit for them, and most definitely, it would definitely be something to think about.
For sure. Well said there. Chris, same question for you. Any advice that you might give a driver that is thinking about making the transition to the office?
I'm just going to agree with Brian. I mean, it's fast-paced. There's a lot more stress, a lot more you have to worry about. Because like Brian said, you're responsible for 25, 30 other people. Out on the road as a driver, you're responsible for yourself. So there's just a lot more to it than most drivers understand.
For sure.
Because they haven't been up here to see what we do on a day-to-day basis.
Right. And it's funny how that kind of goes both ways, because we talked about it earlier. The drivers say, I wish these guys had some experience out on the road. You're kind of saying, man, I wish you could see what it's like from our side of the coin once in a while.
That would probably make them understand what we deal with a lot better.
Sure. Well, nobody's job is easy. I think that's something that we all should remember. If you zoom out, everybody's fighting a battle. And, here at Liquid Trucking, everybody's just fighting the battle for the same reason, right? We're all wanting to take home a paycheck and keep rolling. So it takes a village for sure. And you guys are a big part of that. Mike, I'm going to go on to you. You've got a lot of experience going way back with this company, working with Roger when we were only at 7 trucks here. That's phenomenal. What kind of advice do you have for a driver that might be making or considering the switch to the office?
If drivers consider to switch to the office and they enjoy their 10-hour breaks, or some of them even like to take a 14-hour break, don't consider coming to the office. You're pretty much married to a phone and a computer, and it's multiple computer screens that you're looking at. And it's much easier as far as to maintain, as far as the one load that you are taking care of as a driver. These guys, they work very hard. They're constantly working not only with the drivers 1 to 3 loads a day, but they're working with that many customers as well, And I always would tell the drivers, come about 3 o'clock, don't even bother calling dispatch unless it's absolutely an emergency, because they're getting ready for the next day. It's not so much as they're trying to get out the door at 5 o'clock. So I was really surprised that we were doing this podcast recording at 3 o'clock, but I also understand why Chris and Brian were late 9 minutes to get in there too.
Well,
so,
oh man,
I won't worry about doing $100 fine for these dispatchers being late, and I won't send an email to safety. So this is your warning, guys.
Got it.
Oh, that's great. Well, it's mighty fine of you there, Mike, to not fine these guys for being a little bit late. But I got to take my share of the responsibility as well, because I was hunting down phone numbers. And look, at the same time, I've got broad shoulders. I say if anything happens that's connected with the podcast in any way, shape, or form, just blame me. It's a lot easier on you guys if you do that, okay?
Yep.
Well, I still remember the first podcast where you say, you don't like it, get over it, build a bridge over it, right?
Yep. Build a bridge and get over it. Amen, man. Well, listen, fellas, I know that you're busy, and I don't want to keep you here any longer than we need to. We've got some great stuff from all 3 of you here, but I love to give everybody the chance for some final thoughts. If there's anything that you didn't get to say that you'd like to say to anybody that might be listening, whether it be Liquid employees, Barto, OFC Schmidt employees, or maybe family members out there listening, I'll give you each the floor for a couple of minutes. Mike, I can start with you. Anything to say before we let you go, my friend?
Well, I just appreciate as far as the support I've received from my wife and 4 boys. And they know as far as where my heart's at. It's basically, it's my family, my employment, and then the fire department. And all the drivers out there, make sure that you have something that you're looking at, that each time that you're behind the wheel, you got to drive for everybody else, but don't forget about the most important part of your family and make sure that you get back home to them each and every week. You ever want to see the owners of this company at an all-time low, just have something happen to one of their employees, and you'll see the owners just devastated that we lost a coworker, an employee. That's just the type of family that Roger Schmidt and Mike Vines are both are, and everything about this department and company being family, you got it right here.
Well said, Mike. Thank you for that. That's safety and fleet coordinator Mike Wilson with some great advice, and you can tell by just listening to this podcast. If there's a driver out there that's considering a career in tanking and you haven't found a gig yet and you're listening to this podcast, take what Mike just said to heart, because all the other drivers and employees, the office staff will tell you the exact same thing. It's a family here at Liquid Trucking, and you feel that come through the airwaves on our podcast here. Chris, anything that you would like to say before I let you go and get back to work, man?
I don't really have much to add to Mike's other than I'd say if you're a driver out there, I know things can get frustrating at times, but you just need to, if you have a problem, come to your dispatcher with a cool level head, show the office staff respect. We'll respect you back and keep you rolling. So
well said there as well. No, you did great. You added to it for sure, Chris. That's load planner Chris Willenborg. And finally, dispatcher Brian Cahoe. Anything to say before we let you go, my friend?
Yeah, I just bounce off of what Mike and Chris said. I've been with the company 2 years, but our leadership here, Roger and Josh and Mike, this is a good company, and the best interest of the driver is what we all strive for every day. I hear it behind the scenes. Roger and Josh sit next to me up here. Our best interest for the driver is the utmost concern. So, work as a team with your dispatcher. We aren't here to boss you around or tell you that you're doing stuff wrong all the time. We just want you to succeed, and the company will succeed.
Great stuff, gentlemen. Mike, Chris, Brian, very much appreciate the time that you shared here with us on the Liquid Trucking Podcast today. We'll get back in touch with you all soon. This was fantastic. You guys did awesome. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you,
Marcus.
All right, Liquid Trucking, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Liquid Trucking Podcast. How awesome of an episode was that? We talk all the time on the podcast about how Liquid's like a big family. And I think there, towards the end of the second interview, you really kind of heard from somebody who's been with Liquid for a very long time in Mike Wilson saying that, listen, these guys, not only are they devastated if something happens to one of their drivers, but they are happy when something good happens for one of their drivers. And they really do have a family environment here at Liquid Trucking, OFC, Schmidt, and Barto. And, you got that from everybody. You can tell that everybody we talk to likes their jobs. They like where they're at. Hey, these guys were all drivers at one point in time, and now they all work in the office. That right there is more than a lot of trucking fleets can offer. 6 people with extensive experience going back all the way to the early 90s or before. That is a lot. So a big, big thank you to all 6 of you guys that came on here today. Chris Baltushis, Cole Brown, Beau Hanke. We had Mike Wilson, Brian Cahoe, and Chris Willenborg. I really appreciate the time. These guys, sometimes people don't realize that when I put in a podcast request to talk to somebody, it is just that. It is a request. And these guys don't have to make time for me. They do make time for me, which is one of the reasons I always say on this podcast, especially as we're wrapping up, it's you guys at Liquid Trucking that provide the content here. It's you guys at Liquid Trucking that make this podcast good. I am a point guard. All I've got to do, and I'm not Steph Curry out here throwing up threes either. No. Call me John Stockton, man. I'll elbow you the ball if it gets to you in the lane and you can take it to the rack. That's my whole job, is to ask some good questions and get a conversation facilitated among people that really know their shit in the trucking industry. And today, I had 6 guys that have it all together and all in a bag. They're working office jobs now. Doesn't mean they don't have some great experience behind the wheel of a truck, and they can help you a lot. So one thing I do hope, I asked the question to all the guys, hey, what's some advice that you would give? Also, another question that I asked to them was, do you let people know? Do you let drivers know that you've driven for a long time, or is it something that you kind of hold close to the vest and wait for the right time? And we got a mix of answers, but one of the reasons that I asked that question was because I know that people listening to this episode right now will have learned that, hey, I didn't know that Mike had that much experience, or man, I had no idea Chris had spent that much time behind the wheel. So that's kind of the reason here. I hope that it facilitates some more communication because, as always, like Chris Baltushis told us, communication is paramount. So, you know what, drivers? That's all I've got for you today. I appreciate every single last one of you. I hope you're out there staying safe as school starts to get back in session here as we creep into August and then finally roll into my favorite season of the year, which is the fall because of football. Just be safe. Lots of kids out there on the road, lots of people going to and from, and life is kind of speeding up a little bit as we head out of a nice hot summer into hopefully what will be a little bit of a cool fall, especially over here in the Pacific Northwest where the entire world is on fire. Thanks everyone for joining the podcast. Thank you out there for listening and clicking subscribe. It helps us greatly. If you could leave us a review, I really appreciate it. Shout out Alex Shevchuk. I saw your review, bro. Thank you so much. I'd love to see reviews from some of the rest of you guys out there that listen to this podcast on whatever podcast platform you listen on, Apple, Spotify, YouTube Music, wherever it is that you find it. We appreciate those reviews and they help us a lot because when there's other prospective drivers out here checking us out, maybe thinking, I'll listen to that podcast because I think I might want to work for that company. Well, it's your reviews that they read. It's your ratings that they trust. It's not just me talking up here. So it means a lot to us that you subscribe, that you leave a review, and of course, the most important thing, that you take part in the show. I can't thank you all enough. I'm going to get out of here. We'll see you all next week right here on the Liquid Trucking Podcast. Stay safe, drivers. Keep the shiny side up.
Thanks for tuning in and being the gold standard of drivers on the road. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and tune in next week for another episode of the Liquid Trucking Podcast.